They were so close-minded and ignorant. I honestly will say ignorant because they couldn't imagine that a life different than theirs would still be a life worth living.
Hello, you're listening to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney, and today I have mom Venessa McLeod to share her journey with her 2.5-year-old daughter, Ivy. Ivy was born with a limb difference, which was discovered halfway through Venessa's pregnancy. Because of this, she was pressured by her medical team to terminate the pregnancy. In this episode, we dig into what that was like for her, the ableism that fuels that type of pressure to terminate, as well as the ableism that we have started to unlearn as parents. For those listening who are wondering what I'm talking about when I say ableism, and you may have never heard the term before, it is defined as discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. I hadn't even heard the term until a year ago, and I acknowledge that this may be the first time for some of you to hear of this concept, and that is okay. We're all in the process of unlearning the ableist thinking that is so ingrained in our society. Now, this episode may be a bit triggering for those who have also had similar pressure to terminate as Venessa did, and so I encourage you to please be mindful of that and listen with caution. Venessa and her husband, Sean, live in British Columbia, Canada, with their 2 adorable daughters, Elena, who is 5, and Ivy, who is 2.5, and their dog, Lucky, who was also born with a limb difference. They did this intentionally so Ivy could have a buddy. I think that's really cool. Venessa is a lover of coffee and reading. Let's dig in. Hi, Venessa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm really excited to chat about your story with Ivy and just the ways that you have evolved as her mother from the time you knew about her. So really quick, I would love for you to give just a brief overview of Ivy and kind of who she is.
Yeah. So Ivy, she is 2.5 years old. I have 2 daughters, so she's my younger daughter. She has taught me so much in the short 2.5 years that I've been her mother. But long story short, she was born without hands. So that's obviously been quite the progression for myself as her mother from the moment I found out to now. And she honestly is just a fearless, determined little girl, but with such a joyful spirit. Like it blows me away. Like even strangers can tell that she's just such a happy kid. Like her smile is infectious. She's got the most magical laugh, and she's just a huge blessing in my life. Like I am so grateful every single day to be her mom.
I love that. I can even following you on Instagram. I feel like I can perceive that even just from pictures, which I know is kind of hard to know, but just the way she smiles and the way her face just totally lights up.
Yeah.
She's so cute. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
She literally, like, I now understand the expression, like when you say someone can light up a room, like that's what I
Mm.
do. It's pretty special.
Oh, I love that. So I would love to jump right in. And for you, I was reading a little bit on your blog about, your story of when you first found out that she had any differences physically. And I would love for you to bring us back to that 19-week ultrasound and, what happened, how you felt, all the tea.
All the tea. So yeah, I had a very routine, detailed anatomy scan where they measure the baby, make sure everything's on track. And so at the actual appointment, like where I live, the techs aren't actually allowed to say anything. So they just scan you silently. They don't say anything. But what I remember from that appointment is how long it took. Because I had been pregnant before, and it was a very long appointment. And the tech actually, like, she's someone that I know. So she hit it very well that there were possibly any complications of any sort. But
Hmm.
I do remember, she printed out pictures of Ivy and showed me her head and here are her toes. Um, And now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, she never said, oh, here are her hands.
Oh
uh,
man.
yeah, but the appointment itself, the only thing off about it was just how long it took. But then the next morning, I got a call from my midwife because the scans had obviously been sent to my midwife, who was in charge of my care. And she just kind of bluntly told me, she's like, Vanessa, there were some significant findings on this scan. I think that you should leave your elder daughter at home and just come to the appointment alone, like without any kids. But like, make sure you bring a support person with you, like bring your husband with you to this appointment because there were significant findings.
Oh
Um,
man.
and so she didn't say anything other than that. So obviously I had a bit of a meltdown because I don't
Yeah.
know what's wrong. I don't know the extent of it. Was I losing my baby? I didn't know. I didn't know anything at that point. And my husband was actually out of town for work. So I called my mom and she ended up coming with me to the appointment. And my dad met me there too.
Mm.
I'm guessing because my mom probably wanted a support person of her own because
Yeah, yeah.
we didn't know what to think.
Yeah.
So we go to this appointment. I had been sobbing all morning,
Oh,
pretty
man.
hysterical. So she sits us down and just kind of gets right to it and, tells us that, there were a couple other findings, but the biggest one being that she didn't have any limbs from her elbow down. So yeah, no elbows, no forearms, no hands
Mm.
on both sides. And I remember just kind of like keeling over and just crying and just feeling heartbroken because I sometimes I feel guilty telling the story because I've learned a lot, at this point. So my viewpoints have
Mhm.
obviously changed, but in that moment as a mother, you envision your baby, a healthy baby, and being told that that's not quite the full story anymore.
Mm.
It's devastating. And I had never even heard of anything like this happening before. I didn't know this was something that could happen in
Yeah.
utero. When she told us there were significant findings, I'm like, oh, is there something wrong with her brain? Is there something wrong with her heart? Like, I remember thinking to myself, I just want to keep my baby. Like, I don't want to be going through a miscarriage. Like, I've never had a miscarriage before. It's,
Mm.
I mean, it's not something any mother wants, but
Yeah.
I was terrified. I just wanted to keep my baby. So, you know, I don't know. It's like the feelings were so complex and
Mhm.
deep, and sometimes it's hard to verbalize, but I remember just feeling a lot of heartbreak and grief and
Mhm.
fear, like unparalleled fear, because you envision the future and then all of a sudden it changes and you don't know what to expect anymore. And that was very scary for me.
Yeah.
Right away though, they booked us a specialist appointment for the very next day with a whole slew of medical professionals. It was going to be like an hour and a half long ultrasound with like perinatologists and medical geneticists and genetics counselors and, a whole team of medical professionals. So that did give me some hope. And to be quite honest, I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night researching
Yeah.
babies and kids without limbs and, prosthetics for babies. I found the
Mm.
War Amps of Canada, and they actually have a little flyer all about the different kinds of prosthetics that babies can get, what ages they start at, the different types of prosthetics. So, like, obviously, I was still in a full on grieving process, but I'm a researcher by heart.
Mm.
Like, I have my history degree. I research. That's what I do. So I kind of armed myself with research. And
Mhm.
that appointment, I had a whole list of questions. I wanted to know about the team that was going to be taking care of us, who would be part of that team, what that was going to look like, what the plan was.
Mhm.
I wanted to know what our resources were, what our support was going to look like. So, I kind of just armed myself with that, and that helped me a little bit.
So I would love to going back to what you were
Mhm.
expressing about how it felt when she first told you and how you felt going into that appointment, knowing that something was wrong, but not knowing what it was,
Yeah.
thinking that she might die.
Yeah.
Um, as you're talking about it, you said it's hard to articulate what that felt like. But as you're speaking, I feel my heart racing. I feel like
Yeah.
all of the emotions coming because I found out when I was pregnant with my son that
Yeah.
he had birth defects too. And so it's just bringing me right back there. And I totally relate with like the guilt you feel even saying that
Yeah.
out loud because
Yeah.
I think now that we have these like sweet little toddlers that are full of life and we have this great relationship with them, it feels cringy to admit to it, like to say that
It
you
really
were
does. Yeah.
devastated by that, right? Like because you're like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's my child, like that's Ivy."
Yeah.
Um, but on the other hand, like I can guarantee that 99.999% of parents listening right now have felt the same emotions. So anyway, I will
Yeah.
let you continue with your story, but I just wanted to comment on that because
Yeah.
it's so relatable.
It's a very real part of my experience and my particular journey. And it's just something you can never prepare for, or at least I couldn't. Like I said, I didn't even know this was on the table that a baby could be born this way.
Yeah.
Um, Talking to other parents of kids with limb differences, this is a very real part of the journey. And like
Mhm.
I said, 99.999% of parents feel devastated by this. And like I said, I don't like that I felt this way now, but this is just
Mhm.
real. Like I was absolutely devastated and I felt like it was over.
Yeah.
The fear is just, it overtakes you and you don't know what to think anymore. So that's why, like that night, I kind of just went back to my comfort zone, I guess, and I researched. Um,
Yeah, because that
so,
can
you
give
know,
you well, I just love that you like researched it because I think the fear you're speaking to, like that is such a big part of that diagnosis. And such a big part of the fear is like not knowing, like, what the heck does this mean? Like, I can't
yeah,
even picture this anymore. This baby that I was like bonding with and envisioning, like,
yeah.
that
Or
the whole image changes.
yeah. So I was, 19, 20 weeks pregnant. Like I love this baby already. Like, Ivy was very wanted before she was conceived. Um, but anyway, dove into research because it was what I knew. And I guess that was my way of trying to tame the fear or gain some kind of control because I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And going into that specialist appointment, I wanted answers. I wanted to know, okay, why did this happen? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my baby? And,
Mhm.
as well as all the other questions I've already said, like, what's the plan going forward?
Mhm.
And, knowing what our resources and support were going to be like. So we get to, this big hospital, like our provincial hospital, and we have the hour-long ultrasound. And then we sat down with two doctors. One was a genetics counselor, one was a medical geneticist. And, I felt like I was going in to this meeting equipped and like armored almost, like with my list of questions and
Mhm.
wanting to talk about, okay, what's the plan? And why did this happen? I was looking for hope. I was desperate for hope. Like that's why I had stayed up all night researching, is because I'm looking for any shred of hope.
Mhm.
And just in all regards, I was disappointed by that appointment. There was zero hope offered to me. There was zero encouragement offered to me. There was no support. There were no resources offered to me. I basically was told to terminate my pregnancy. Um, and when, my husband and I kind of like were like, what? No.
Mhm.
The doctor said, just very bluntly, she says, well, think about her quality of life. She's going to have no hands. So then this introduces a whole slew of new feelings like guilt. Like, am I being a terrible mother for bringing this child into the world? Like these doctors who have spent their
Mhm.
lives researching genetic differences or genetic mutations, whatever you want to call it, they're telling me to terminate. And like, I'm a person who's always kind of like, oh, you've done your research. This is your area of expertise. I'm going to listen to you.
Mhm.
So it's really difficult to process that when someone's telling you something like that. Um, and I started to question myself, like, am I a bad mother for bringing Ivy into this world? Because they're telling me that she's going to have no quality of life. They're basically telling me her life is going to suck and that there
Mhm.
is no hope and that it is over and that I need to terminate. But yeah, that just wasn't something that I could do.
Oh my gosh, I can't like I was reading your blog post about that where you wrote a an open letter to that doctor
Yeah.
and I was just so full of like I don't even know, like it's just so much emotion like reading that and like especially with the knowledge that you have now like with Ivy and your
Yeah.
relationship with her and just how completely offensive that is to
Yeah.
be like, you can't determine my child's quality of life. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know what that's going to be like? And who are you to even advise me to that?
Yeah. There are some big systemic problems with what happened at our appointment. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the letters, because I want to change that.
Yeah.
But like it's kind of funny because I think about my appointment with my midwife when I found out, but this appointment with this medical geneticist was a million times worse, because that's when I really felt grief, like 10 times worse than my meeting with my midwife.
Mm.
That's when I really kind of went to a dark place in my pregnancy. It was because of this doctor and what she said to me and the words she spoke over my daughter's life. Um, I was not in a good place, honestly. Like, that night, the night I found out, I kept researching. I was like, okay, like, I was searching for hope and grasping for it. And this doctor kind of just took that all away from me.
Yeah.
So that meeting was definitely worse. It was probably the worst day of my life, to be honest.
That makes so much sense. I have this really like clear memory during my pregnancy with Kimball where it was kind of a similar thing where they're like, at what point is intervention too much intervention and you would want to like let him go? Because honestly, that could be more selfless than keeping him here. And that's
Yeah.
before he was born. I was like, oh my gosh, like what a dilemma. Like
Yeah.
you have like this fierce maternal instinct to protect this child. You already love them. Everything in you wants to help them be happy, to keep them alive. And then to be told that you as the parent need to decide when you could be selfless enough to let them go is
Exactly. Yeah.
just so against all like natural, like
Yeah.
it just feels so dark.
I think it is something that no one will ever understand until you're put in that situation. Like, we can talk about it
Yeah.
all we want and try to raise awareness, but just the complexity of those emotions and like, I don't know, it's hard to put into words. And I really don't think anyone
Mm.
will understand what that truly felt like unless they go through it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting because not all of our community, found out when we were pregnant, like you and I did, but I think that that is a unique thing. At least in that kind of situation is like when you find out while you're pregnant,
Yeah.
which, which that reminds me too of like when we were chatting off the hook last night. You mentioned how you have tried to be a source of that hope that you were looking for from
Hmm.
that doctor that you did not receive, that you
Yeah.
have been, trying to help other families, like as they find out while they're pregnant, about their children having limb differences.
Yeah.
And you spoke of specifically, one mom, and it was really hard for you that she did end up choosing to terminate. Do you mind talking about how that went for you and what that was like?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, a big reason of why I share so much about my life with Ivy is because I want to be that source of hope for other parents that I never got.
Mhm.
Because while I was pregnant, I was searching for that hope. I never found it really while pregnant. Um, I didn't really start connecting with other families until after she was born. So if I can give even the slightest bit of hope to families as they're going through this and just finding out, then like I want that. I want these parents to have hope and to know that they're not alone in this. And that's why I share. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I've had a lot of pregnant women reach out to me all with the same story. Oh, I just had my 20-week ultrasound, found out baby is missing XYZ, one hand, both hands, all four limbs, three limbs, whatever it may be. And they're reaching out to me. Usually they don't even know what they're looking for. They
Mhm.
just are connecting because they're desperate, just as I was. And so, I offer as much as I can. Like, I'll tell them all about the supports that I found, the resources that I found, and probably most importantly, the community I found. Like, I share all
Mm.
these different accounts with them too. Like the Lucky Finn project is huge. They're based in the States, but they're really international. Like, I have connected with families all over the world. I just don't want
Wow.
anybody to ever feel alone, because there's a huge community and it is an incredible community. Like, I honestly feel lucky to be a part of it. So, I just hope to offer that to parents. So, it happens a lot where women reach out to me and they've discovered their baby has a limb difference and they don't know what to do. And so, I just offer what I can. And so there was one mother in particular, very similar limb differences to Ivy, except I believe she didn't have any arms. So, I talked with this mom a lot. She was feeling super conflicted because, unlike me, her family was not supportive. And not only were the doctors wanting her to terminate, but her family was as well. So she wasn't receiving support from her family. So that was really difficult for her. And, something that I was blessed with. I was blessed with a very supportive family. So I did my best to be there for her and be that support for her and essentially even be that family for her. I remember saying to her, like, take a look at my entire Instagram account, like watch all these stories that I've shared about Ivy, like just, experience her joy. Like, your daughter will thrive. She can have a full life. I know it's scary, but, she'll have quality of life unlike what you're being told. And then I didn't hear from her for a while. So then I followed up with her and she was devastated, but she shared with me that she had chosen to terminate her pregnancy. And she shared with me what she named the baby. She shared with me a picture of her little toe prints that she had gotten done after she terminated. And to be quite honest, I was a wreck for a few days because I felt like I know there were other circumstances involved and she wasn't receiving support. And that's a completely different story than what I experienced. But I felt like she looked at Ivy and decided that that wasn't enough, even though I know that's not the case. But, these are just the real emotions that I feel sometimes. Yeah. I had a really rough few days after that. I was devastated for this mom, for this baby, because I'd already kind of imagined her growing up with Ivy and being Ivy's friend. So I felt that loss too. Yeah, it was really, really, really difficult.
I think I feel like as parents, and especially for you, since it was such a similar disability, I guess, that it personally, I feel like I can relate with her. Like where I'm like, okay, honestly, there was a lot of fear. Like there was a lot of is this the best thing for them? Like, like you were saying, am I being selfish by having this child? And then, but also on the flip side, I think I don't want to say offensive because I don't want to sound offensive, but I think it really does. It hits really close to home for us too, because, she's one of our children, these wonderful kids that we love so much and are so diverse and are so just human. I think that it is, I don't know. I don't know if that even makes sense, but it hits closer to home and it's ouch, but it's also but I also can empathize with her.
Yeah, I could empathize because I knew she wasn't getting support. And I honestly don't know what I would have done if I didn't have support. I can't say one way or the other because in that moment you have doctors telling you that you're not going to be a good enough parent to take care of your child and give them a proper life, a full life. And I can't imagine, because in my case, when we're meeting with these doctors, they gave us some privacy to talk. And it was my husband who said to me, he's like, I will build her whatever I need to build. I will take care of her for the rest of her life. I want her, she's ours. And he's so passionate about it and just kind of knocked my senses back into me. And I'm like, yeah, of course we want her, because I'm ashamed to admit this, but I doubt it because these doctors made me doubt my own ability as a mother to care for my child, to give her a happy life, a full life. They made me feel like that wasn't possible. And it's like I had said, am I being a bad mother by bringing her into this world? That's what these doctors were making me feel. So I can't judge anybody because I understand the guilt that's being heaped onto them and the pressure that's being put on them. But you're right. It hits so close to home. And I really did feel it as a loss, a personal loss. Because like I said, I had already pictured our two girls growing up together. You relate on such a deep level to other parents who have gone through the same thing. And I honestly, truly view the Lucky Fan community as our family. So I felt that loss on such a deep level. It was very devastating.
Yeah. And like,
So
if you really think about it, like in that type of like just heart wrenching situation when they're telling you like the selfless thing would be
yeah,
to terminate. Like, if you
yeah,
really loved your child, you would terminate. And, and so a lot of parents, I think
mhm,
that like have even done that, have followed through, like, we're probably making this
yeah,
sacrifice on like that they felt was best for their child, which like, we know that these children can grow to have these wonderful, amazing, fulfilled lives. And so, I mean, like, I think honestly, to be honest, like, I get filled with anger when I
yeah.
picture the misinformation that these doctors are giving that they really, I'll be bold to say it, they really have no right to give. Because
They don't.
are they parents of these kids? Like, do they know their quality of life? Are they these, these people with limb differences? They're not. And these other,
Yeah,
disabilities. And I feel like it's the elephant in the room. But can we also like talk about the ableism in this? Like
yeah,
the fact that
yeah,
they're like, well, this child is different, therefore she will have no quality of life.
yeah. They were so close-minded and ignorant. I honestly will say ignorant because they couldn't imagine that a life different than theirs would still be a life worth living.
Yeah.
And, the fact that this particular doctor has studied medicine and genetic anomalies for 40 years, and you're still so ignorant, you haven't researched enough into the lives of the people who are actually living to get the full picture. Like, I doubt that she has any involvement in any disability community whatsoever because it's like you
Mm,
said, her words and her actions were so ableist. She literally said, through what she didn't say, she's saying, okay, well, your daughter doesn't deserve life.
yeah.
She doesn't have hands. And, it's like I said, she couldn't imagine a life different than hers would be worth living.
Yeah. And I feel like this situation is like the ultimate like example of kind of an ableist mentality towards like termination because, a lot of us have been told that we should terminate with a
Mm.
lot of complex medical issues. And yet Ivy had a lack of hands. You know what I'm saying?
That was still enough for them to suggest termination because when we declined that, then they wanted me to do an amniocentesis, which is when they draw amniotic fluid out of the urine sac and they test it and they do genetic testing to see what else may be going on,
Mhm.
or what was the cause of it or whatever. But again, with that, there's a 2% chance of miscarriage. So, my husband and I already decided, well, we love Ivy. We want Ivy. We'll take her however she is. Like, she's our baby.
Mhm.
We want her however she is made. That's who she is, and that's who we want.
Yeah.
Um, I just didn't want to add any further risk to my pregnancy with her. So we declined the amnio. And, when I said that, then the doctor just completely shut down and was like, well, then there's nothing we can tell you because we don't know why this happened. And, I remember talking to her about like resources. And again, this is why I say she probably has no affiliation or any experience with any form of a disability community because I was like, well, what about like the war amps? Because again, I'd stayed up all night researching. So I already had an idea of, at least in Canada, what supports or organizations might be out there. And so it's like, well, what about the war amps in Canada? And she's like, oh, I don't know anything about that.
Oh
And just
my
like
gosh.
completely shut it down. Wasn't even like, oh, I haven't heard about them. Let's look into that. Nothing. Like they obviously hadn't done their research. They didn't look
Mm.
into a limb different community, you know?
Yeah. 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 They had one agenda. And, I think a lot of people who are told to terminate, like, there are a lot of medical stuff and a low chance of survival or like a short life. And I think that is where it kind of gets like even more complicated. But a lot of parents, that I've talked to feel, and again, this doesn't go for everyone, but we're like, well,
Yeah.
we'll take them as long as we get them, and we'll give them the best life we can. And I don't know, I feel like channeling all that fear and unknown the way that you did that first time you found out that anything was different about her, where you went and researched like, okay, what are the resources, what should we do about this, how can we give her the best life possible, like channeling it into like this fierce like desire to give them the best life. Like that really is the most productive and most healing way to, I think, cope with this type of news.
Yeah. It was great for a day.
Yeah.
Like I said, until the doctor just like kind of like ripped the rug out from underneath my feet. And I just fell into a really dark place. But, it
Mhm.
really is nothing short of eugenics. That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
that's what it is. talked to a lot of different mothers too, even in my own community. And there's so many different reasons that they've all been told to terminate. Like one mother was because she had low amniotic fluid.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't even know what that could mean. And then, of course, they always give the worst case scenario too and scare you. Like I
Yeah.
said, more fear.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think like there is just such an ignorance, like you said, to what happens after that child is born. Like, well, what about all the joy? What about all the laughter? What about like there's just this human that is just as diverse as anyone else in their likes and dislikes and just how human they are. And I think
Yeah.
that's what it does. It really feels like it dehumanizes our children.
Yeah. It really,
And that's not okay.
no, no, like it definitely, like there was no compassion. There was no empathy. There was no sympathy. There was nothing. There was no emotion from this doctor.
Hmm.
And that was really unfortunate.
Tell me about the rest of your pregnancy. You said you went to a really dark place. How did the rest of your pregnancy play out and then ultimately the birth?
I mean, I remember leaving the hospital that day after meeting with the medical geneticist, and I was just, devastated. I was heartbroken all over again. I felt like I had tried to research and feel some hope, and everything was dashed. And I remember crying in the hospital and saying to my husband, "Why is this happening to us?" Um, I didn't understand it. I got zero answers from doctors. Not only had they not answered my questions, I had filled the entire backside of my page with more questions because they refused to answer any questions. And I even tried to be like, okay, well, like, what's our team going to look like? What's the rest of my pregnancy going to look like? And they were like, oh, like, we probably don't need to see you again throughout the rest of your pregnancy, which was super concerning to me because,
Yeah.
first we pump you full of fear. And then they're like, oh, well, you don't want an amnio or you don't want to terminate. So sorry,
Oh
you're
my
on your own.
gosh.
Like I literally I felt so alone. And I think that's what added to the grief. Like, how are you supposed to process something like that
Yeah.
when, oh, it's, yeah. So anyway, husband and I get
Mm.
home. Like I said, I'm a researcher. So I think I just continued to try to do that throughout the rest of my pregnancy. And, I had 20 weeks left in my pregnancy. I don't know how. I honestly don't know how. I just kind of came to a place where I felt like, well, I remember my dad saying something to me too. He said, Vanessa, I think we need someone like her in our family. She's going to teach us a lot. And I think I held on to
Mm.
my dad's words a lot because then I just started to feel like, A, I think that she needs me, like, because I was doing all this
Mm.
research and I just felt already passionate about her and about her life. And,
Mm.
I thought, you know what? I'm someone who can fight for her. Like maybe that's why I'm her mother. And then I also got to this place where I was like, you know what? Like, I don't think she needs me. I think I need her.
Mm.
Um, because even while I was pregnant, dealing with these emotions, I was learning so much, connecting with other organizations and other parents slowly at the start. But,
Mhm.
like basically your whole worldview is shifted in an instant.
Yeah.
So it's really quite powerful when that happens and when everything you'd previously thought is challenged, because like
Mm.
I was devastated, I was heartbroken, I was full of grief. So I had to process those emotions and come to a place of acceptance and feel hope about her life. And I did start to feel that because you start to connect with other parents and they've got kids living with differences. And then so you're challenged. You're saying, well, why do you think
Mhm.
their life is any less because they're different? Why
Yeah.
did I think that? Why did I ever feel that way?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really does. Like, I'll say it. I was ableist before I had IVY. I didn't even know that was a term, but
Mhm.
I believed the doctors when they told me that she'd have no quality of life
Yeah.
because I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And so now I do. Like I said, I've done a lot of research. I've learned about ableism. I've learned about like, disability rights activists and the whole disability rights movement and, just what my daughter deserves in life.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been really powerful shifting your entire almost world perspective, honestly.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I think you mentioned this a bit ago, but the communities and the groups that we become a part of, and like kind of like
Mhm.
by proxy because of our kids, like with the other parents and
Yeah.
kind of rubbing shoulders with, like, it's just such a privilege. Like, honestly, like I've met the coolest people because like, oh, like, well, there's a deaf adult I would have never met because of my son.
Yeah.
And, all the different parents. And I just think I agree. Like it's a pretty steep learning curve, like to kind of
Yeah.
adjust to it and unlearn all of our ableist like ideas and perceptions about the world. But then like once you do, it's like, wow, like you said, like this whole new worldview that we probably couldn't have gotten really any other way as intensely and as quickly as we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I that resonates.
I know. I really, like I said this already, and I really mean it. Like, I feel lucky to be part of this community. I really do.
Hmm.
I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change a single thing about Ivy. She's absolutely perfect the way she is. And, I remember shortly after she was born, my mom, sorry, mom, for sharing this, but I was hurt because someone had said, like, oh, that's so sad that happened to your baby. And then I was
Hmm.
hurt, offended by that. And my mom kind of says, well, Vanessa, like, it is sad. Like, in a perfect world, she wouldn't be born this way. So, those are the inherent ableism that we've grown up this way, thinking that
Yeah.
someone is different or quote unquote imperfect. In an ideal world, in a perfect world, they would have hands or they would have hearing or they would have eyesight. But
Hmm.
you can't think that way
Yeah.
because this is the world and everybody's different. And differences are a natural, beautiful part of life. And it is not sad. They are not any less because they're born different. Their life is not sad. What is sad is if you can't see that.
Mhm. And who are you to say what makes a good quality of life too? Like
Yeah.
I remember like a parent I talked to a long time ago, she mentioned that and I was like, yeah, like how
Mhm.
can anyone else determine? And honestly, like a lot of these kids and adults with disabilities are happier than people who are quote unquote perfectly formed, right?
Yeah.
Like what kind of bearing does that have?
Well, and like you really can't predict that sort of thing. Like, you might
Yeah.
have a baby that looks typical in all regards, and then, they grow up to be an awful human being.
Yeah.
Like you don't know. You can't control that. And I feel like I don't know. Like there's another mom I've connected with, and she always says, every baby is a gamble, but we love them anyway.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, who are you
Yeah.
to like who are you to decide what their life is going to be like before they're even born?
Yeah. And I think like honestly, I thought that I loved my children unconditionally before because I also have an older daughter. I thought I
Hmm.
loved them unconditionally before he was born, but then like now I'm like, oh, my unconditional love capacity, I guess, has grown so much because it's like you just kind of let go of all of those parameters that maybe you didn't even realize you had on your love for your
Yeah,
children, but like maybe they were there. And all of that is like broken open and you realize like, wow, I truly can love anyone and any
yeah,
like difference than myself or what I'm used to seeing.
yeah. Because all humans deserve that.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter how you're born. All humans deserve to be loved
Yes.
and accepted, and they deserve to be fought for, and they deserve access. They deserve everything. Why would they not? Just because they're born different?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that is a great note to end on. I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on and share about your journey and kind of your transformation really with
Yeah.
Ivy. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the space to share this. It's important.
Head to the website to see adorable photos of Venessa and her family. You can also check out the show notes to find links to her and my Instagram accounts if you want to follow there. I will also put a link for Venessa's blog, which has an open letter to the doctors who pressured her to terminate her pregnancy. It is beautifully written and may be helpful to those who are still processing a similar experience. Also in the show notes are links to the War Amps of Canada, the Lucky Finn Project, and a couple of books with characters who also have limb differences. I love both these books. The first is When Charlie Met Emma by mom Amy Webb, and the second is probably my favorite children's book on disability. It's called What Happened to You by James Catchpole. an adult with a limb difference. So definitely check those out. Also, a quick little fun fact. The meeting that Venessa talked about so much in this episode with the geneticist when they pressured her to terminate her pregnancy happened to occur on Halloween. So this Halloween marks 3 years since then. So I thought that was kind of meaningful that this episode releases so close to Halloween. Join Venessa and me next week for her special topic. We talk accessibility, exploring ableism even deeper. These topics are so important. Don't miss it. See you then.